This program is supported by PMEG Premium at Protect Plus Gold. Sama-sama sa laban, walang iwanan.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says completing a two-way corridor for travel between the largely COVID-free neighbors.
North Korea will not attend this year's Tokyo Olympics because of the pandemic, blowing the final whistle on Seoul's hopes of using the Games to restart talks with its nuclear-armed neighbor.
Once Mr. Floyd
and the Minneapolis police chief Medaria Arredondo testified on Monday that Officer Derek Chauvin violated the department's training policies and its values by kneeling on George Floyd's neck after he had stopped resisting.
First in the news, a top official in the European Medicines Agency said in an interview published on Tuesday that there is a link between the Astrazeneca coronavirus vaccine and blood clots. He said, in my opinion, we can say it now. It is clear there is a link with the vaccine, but we still do not know what causes this reaction. According to EMA head of vaccines, Marco Cavalleri, and he told this to Italy's Il Messaggero newspaper. He said that, quote, in the next few hours, we will say that there is a connection, but we still have to understand how this happens, unquote. Persistent questions on whether rare but serious blood clots among those getting the AstraZeneca jab against COVID-19 are more frequent than in the general population have undermined confidence in the beleaguered vaccine. After several countries suspended the use of the jab, including Italy, the EMA declared that the benefits outweigh the risks and it should remain in use. But it has said that a causal link between clots and the vaccine is possible and is expected to provide an updated assessment this week.
In other news, New Zealand has approved quarantine-free travel with Australia, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said Tuesday, completing a two-way corridor for travel between the largely COVID-free neighbors. Watch this.
I can confirm that quarantine-free travel between New Zealand and Australia will commence in just under 2 weeks' time, from 11:59 p.m. Sunday, April 18. This is an important step forward in our COVID response and represents an arrangement I do not believe we have seen in any other part of the world, that is safely opening up international travel to another country while continuing to pursue a strategy of elimination and a commitment to keeping the virus out.
Another big step today with the opening of the Tasman. It is 6 months ago almost that Australia opened up to New Zealand, and I'm very pleased that the New Zealand government has decided that two-way travel will commence Monday fortnight. Prime Minister Ardern called me last night and we had a very positive discussion about this. It's something we've been talking about for some time. And this is the first of many more steps to come, I believe. Buying again will mean jobs, it will mean people reunited, it will mean many opportunities as those normal relations are restored between Australia and New Zealand. At the other end, I mean, the New Zealand-Australia travel market is a very high-volume market and it works really well for people on both sides of the Tasman. And after spending all that time in New Zealand for the past year, I'm sure there so many will be keen to get on that plane and come across to whether it's Queensland, New South Wales, WA, Tasmania, wherever they'd like to go. So, look, it is a win-win outcome for the trans-Tasman travel to be open. And we have looked at countries like Singapore and Japan and South Korea and countries like this, but at this stage we're not in a position to move forward on any of those at this point.
The travel bubble comes more than a year after New Zealand closed its doors in the face of the coronavirus pandemic and 6 months after Australia allowed Kiwis to fly into selected states without the need to quarantine. Ardern described it as a world-leading move between New Zealand, with just 26 COVID-19 deaths in a population of 5 million, and Australia with fewer than 1,000 deaths in a population of 25 million. New Zealand's beleaguered tourism industry said the long-awaited bubble could inject up to billions of New Zealand dollars into the economy this year. The South Pacific nation is a popular holiday destination, and its COVID-crippled tourism industry has been pressing for months to have quarantine-free travel for Australians, who make up about 40% of international visitors. Air New Zealand immediately announced it was ramping up flights to Australia from the current 4 a week to more than 20 when the bubble takes effect. However, Virgin Australia said while the travel bubble was a step in the right direction, it would only be offering a limited schedule for flights to the ski resort town of Queenstown over the next 5 months. One of the hurdles in setting up the two-way corridor has been sporadic outbreaks of community transmission in both countries, with Australia repeatedly suspending quarantine-free travel from New Zealand due to virus outbreaks in Auckland. The flare-ups have been successfully contained with snap lockdowns, and Ardern said travelers needed to be aware that further outbreaks in either country could impact on travel plans.
Meanwhile, North Korea will not attend this year's Tokyo Olympics because of the coronavirus pandemic. Pyongyang Sports Ministry said, dashing Seoul's hopes of using the Games to restart talks with its nuclear-armed neighbor. The isolated North's participation in the last Winter Games, hosted by the South in Pyeongchang, was a catalyst in the diplomatic rapprochement of 2018. But Pyongyang's announcement extinguishes the possibility that the postponed Tokyo Games, due to begin in July, could kick off a reset in the now deadlocked talks process. Seoul's reunification ministry said it was sorry that the COVID situation had prevented the Games from serving as an opportunity to advance peace on the Korean peninsula. Japan's chief government spokesman, Katsunobu Kato, said it was monitoring the reports and authorities were seeking to improve the environment, including infection countermeasures, so that many countries and regions can participate in the Tokyo Games. But analysts said other factors may have been at play. Yang Moo-jin, a professor at the University of North Korean Studies in Seoul, told AFP that Pyongyang seems to be protesting against Japan's policies on North Korea, as sensitive issues such as human rights and sanctions have been raised by Tokyo along with the U.S. The North regularly excoriates Olympic host nation Japan over its brutal 20th century annexation, with KCNA carrying a report on Sunday condemning new Japanese history textbooks as persistent and shameless distortion of history. Tokyo regularly demands resolution of the issue of Japanese citizens kidnapped by the North, although Pyongyang insists it has returned all those it seized who are still alive.
Meanwhile, during the 6th day of the testimony of the Derek Chauvin trial, prosecutors called Minneapolis Police Chief Medaria Arredondo to the stand. Here's a note before watching this. This report contains disturbing images from Mr. Floyd's death that were shown during testimony. Watch this.
When do you believe, or do you have a belief as to when this restraint, the restraint on the ground that you viewed, should have stopped?
Once Mr. Floyd, and this is based on my viewing of the videos, once Mr. Floyd had stopped resisting, and certainly once he was in distress and trying to verbalize that, that should have stopped. There's an initial reasonableness in trying to just get him under control in the first few seconds, but once there was no longer any resistance, and clearly when Mr. Floyd was no longer responsive and even motionless to continue to apply that level of force to a person proned out, handcuffed behind their back, that in no way, shape, or form is anything that is by policy, it is not part of our training, and it is certainly not part of our ethics or our values.
Arredondo, 54, the first black police chief of Minneapolis, fired Chauvin and the 3 other officers involved in the arrest that led to Floyd's death the day after the incident. Chauvin has pleaded not guilty to charges of murder and manslaughter. Another senior Minneapolis police officer, Inspector Katie Blackwell, testified on Monday about the training in the use of force that Chauvin and other officers received. Blackwell, who headed the police training unit, was shown a picture of Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck and asked if that was an approved neck restraint. The cause of Floyd's death is a key argument of the case, with prosecutors saying that oxygen deprivation was caused by Chauvin's action.
In other news, Jordan's Prince Hamza pledged loyalty to the king as the monarch accepted mediation over a rift within the royal family that saw the prince placed under house arrest. The government has accused Hamza, an ex-crown prince and half-brother of King Abdullah II, of a wicked plot and involvement in a seditious conspiracy to destabilize the kingdom's security. Analyst Ahmad Awad said the turbulent events were a first for Jordan. Take a look.
That the King of Jordan is somehow blaming a group of persons that include the former heir to the Jordanian throne because of their attempts to destabilize the situation in Jordan. And what we can understand through this word destabilization is that beyond this same act, or beyond this sole act of destabilization, what allegedly the people that are behind these attempts were looking for was an attempt to get people to claim their will to change the situation, and so by extension to move the King of Jordan and to get him replaced by someone else. The former crown prince is a half-brother to King Abdullah of Jordan, and he was the one that was placed as a crown prince following the will of King Abdullah's father, the former king of Jordan, Hussein. What happened is that in 2004, King of Jordan decided to move out King Hamza, the former crown prince, and to replace him by his own son, King. So since then, we understand that a kind of frustration has been growing up on behalf of the former crown prince because he saw that he was losing power. And based on this, we know and we heard all through the last years that anyway the relation was a bit tense between the two men because of obvious reasons related to power and to the fact that Hamza has been excluded from his right to access the throne one day. Within all of this, the fact is that there is some confusion when it comes to the exact role of each person in all these evolutions. But what is clear is that there is a series of persons that seem to be looking for an alternative to King Abdullah, maybe, by the way, backed by some foreign countries or some groups based in foreign countries. Some people suggest that as we are getting close to the first official century of existence of the Kingdom of Jordan, and in a context where we are celebrating the 10 years of the Arab uprisings, this would have been an opportunity for the plotters to try and, I would say, move their pawns forward, or try and activate their pawns and move forward with their agenda. This is a hypothesis. With avoiding putting the former crown prince in jail, what the King of Jordan is saying is that he is someone responsible. He is someone that cannot be compared to any of the authoritarian leaders of the region that would have easily put in jail someone that is responsible for playing against the interests of the country. I think that when it comes to Jordan, there are threats, there are risks, but I am not sure that we have to worry on the short, on the middle, or the middle run when it comes to Jordan's stability, meaning that Jordan has been very quick in reassuring the international community as a whole, and most precisely Israel, by saying, don't worry, the situation is under control. And I think that the situation is definitely under control. We don't...
Again, the government has accused Hamza, an ex-crown prince, of a wicked plot and involvement in a seditious conspiracy to destabilize the kingdom's security. Hamza, who said he was placed under house arrest while at least 16 others were arrested, had on Monday struck a defiant tone, insisting he would not obey orders restricting his movement. But in an apparent easing of tensions, the 41-year-old prince later pledged his backing to King Abdullah. Hamza's mother, American-born Queen Noor, defended her son, tweeting that she was praying that truth and justice will prevail for all the innocent victims of this, quote, wicked slander.
Meanwhile, damage from a powerful tropical cyclone Seroja, is hindering rescue efforts across Southeast Asia. The storm has claimed the lives of at least 120 people in Indonesia and East Timor. Watch this.
10 menit itu terjadi gemuruh yang sangat besar, di mana kita berpikir gemuruhnya dari lemparan material dari gunung yang ada, erupsi yang ada. Ternyata gemuruh itu juga tidak sampai 30 menit. 30 menit, tidak lama dia langsung berhenti. Setelah itu mau masuk pagi, kita sudah mulai pastikan bahwa terjadi banjir yang sangat besar, yang mana banjir ini barusan yang kita alami ini. Di saat kami sadar itu rumah-rumah semua sudah tertutup. Korban hanya kita selamatkan yang luka-luka itu.
Saya menghimbau kepada seluruh masyarakat untuk mengikuti arahan petugas di lapangan dan selalu meningkatkan kewaspadaan dari bencana banjir dan longsor karena meningkatnya curah hujan yang ekstrim. Perhatikan selalu peringatan dini dari BMKG, adanya bencana banjir bandang dan juga longsor yang terjadi di Provinsi Nusa Tenggara Timur dan Provinsi Nusa Tenggara Barat. Pertama-tama atas nama pribadi dan seluruh rakyat Indonesia, saya menyampaikan duka cita yang mendalam atas korban meninggal dunia dalam musibah tersebut.
Indonesia's disaster management agency said it had recorded 86 deaths in a cluster of remote islands near East Timor, where another 34 have been officially listed as dead since the disaster struck on Sunday. Authorities revised down a higher death toll for Indonesia, citing miscommunication with local agencies. But search and rescue teams there were racing to find more than 100 people still missing and using diggers to clear mountains of debris. The storm swept buildings in some villages down a mountainside and to the shore of the ocean on Lembata Island, where some small communities have been wiped off the map. The disasters are often caused by deforestation, according to environmentalists.
In other news, Israel's president nominated Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to try to form a government after the latest inconclusive election, but voiced doubt that any lawmaker can forge a parliamentary majority. The March 23 election, Israel's fourth in under 2 years, did not produce a clear path for any candidate to form a coalition capable of commanding a majority in the 120-member parliament, prolonging an unprecedented phase of political gridlock. On Monday, President Reuven Rivlin held the traditional round of consultations that follow each Israeli election, seeking recommendations from party representatives on who they want to form a government. Netanyahu secured 52 recommendations, counting 30 from his right-wing Likud party, plus support from Israel's two ultra-Orthodox Jewish religious parties and the far-right religious Zionism Alliance. Centrist opposition leader Yair Lapid earned 45 endorsements. There were 16 abstentions, and religious nationalist leader Naftali Bennett claimed the 7 votes controlled by his Yamina party. Netanyahu now has 28 days to form a government which can be extended by a further 2 weeks. His path to a 61-seat majority is precarious to raise his tally above 52. He will likely need support from his estranged former protege, Religious National First, Naftali Bennett, whose Yamina party controls 7 seats. As Rivlin was holding his talks on Monday, Netanyahu was on trial across the city at Jerusalem District Court, charged with accepting improper gifts and illegally trading regulatory favors with media moguls in exchange for positive coverage in the prosecution's opening arguments and testimony from its first witness. Netanyahu was accused of using his influence to ensure the popular Walla site portrayed him favorably while smearing his rivals.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday gave final approval to legislation allowing him to hold office for 2 additional 6-year terms, opening the possibility for him to stay in power until 2036. The 68-year-old Russian leader, who has already been in power for more than 2 decades, signed off on the bill Monday, according to a copy posted on the government's legal information portal. Putin proposed the change last year as part of constitutional reforms that Russians overwhelmingly backed in a vote in July. Lawmakers approved the bill last month. The legislation will reset presidential term limits, allowing Putin to run again after his current and second consecutive term expires in 2024. Putin was first elected president in 2000 and served 2 consecutive 4-year terms. His ally, Dmitry Medvedev, took his place in 2008, which critics saw as a way around Russia's limit of 2 consecutive terms for presidents.
Meanwhile, jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny said he was suffering from a heavy cough and fever but would continue a hunger strike he launched last week, demanding adequate medical treatment. The jailed leader or Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny announced via a letter posted on his Instagram account that he is going on hunger strike until he receives proper medical treatment for severe back pain and numbness in his legs. His team the next day said he had already lost 8 kilograms or 18 pounds before going on hunger strike, down from the 93 kilograms or 205 pounds he weighed when he arrived at his penal colony due to sleep deprivation. Navalny was arrested on his return to Russia in January after spending months in Germany recovering from a poisoning last summer that he blames on the Kremlin. The opposition politician is serving a 2.5-year sentence on old fraud charges in the colony in the town of Pokrov, some 100 kilometers east of Moscow, known for its harsh discipline.
In other news, Iran on Tuesday welcomed promising recent comments by U.S. officials explicitly suggesting that the United States lift sanctions in order to return to the 2015 nuclear deal. Quote, "We find this position realistic and promising. It could be the start of correcting the bad process that had taken diplomacy to a dead end," end quote. Government spokesman Ali Rabieh saying that to journalists in Tehran. The United States joins talks Tuesday in the Austrian capital, Vienna, where the 2015 agreement was struck, aimed at salvaging the deal. U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from the deal in 2018, imposing a policy of maximum pressure against cash-strapped, isolated Tehran, which responded by progressively rolling back some of its commitments under the accord. But Trump's successor, Joe Biden, has said he is ready to reverse the decision.
Back to the pandemic situation, 8 million inhabitants of Bogota will be put under strict lockdown from Saturday. That is according to Mayor Claudia Lopez, as the Colombian city battles a third wave of the coronavirus pandemic. A third wave of COVID-19 had already started, and it depended on people's behavior whether they could get it under control. The mayor warned in a statement, adding that the restrictions could be extended next week. The measures are in addition to night curfews imposed the day before by the government that cover 7 million people in the cities of Medellin, Cali, Barranquilla, and Santa Marta, where the health system is overwhelmed by the virus. Since the end of March, Colombian authorities have imposed and tightened nighttime restrictions in an effort to stop a new outbreak. However, infections and deaths have continued to rise, and there is concern about the effect of the Catholic Easter holidays, traditionally a popular time to travel in Colombia. The South American country has so far administered at least one dose of COVID vaccine to 2.4 million of its 50 million inhabitants, and Colombia has the second most cases in Latin America at more than 2.4 million, behind Brazil, and the third most deaths at 64,293 after its giant neighbor and Mexico.
Here in the Philippines now, where President Rodrigo Duterte has ordered the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, or PhilHealth, to cover the expenses of COVID-19 patients confined in temporary tents set up outside hospitals. Malacanang said that on Tuesday. Duterte's fresh directive came following reports that patients are allegedly being charged 1,000 pesos per hour for staying in temporary hospital tents while waiting to be admitted to a room. Watch this.
Nagbigay ng direktiba po ang ating presidente sa Philippine Health Insurance Corporation na kasama sa health insurance coverage ang RT-PCR test, isolation sa accredited community isolation units at hospitalization para sa mild at critical cases ng COVID-19. Kaugnay nito, kung ang tents ay kasama sa inpatient care, kailangan covered ito sa kasalukuyang inpatient COVID-19 package. Mamayang hapon po ay bubuksan sa Quezon Institute ang 110-bed moderate to serious bed capacity. Kasama ito sa modular hospital na ating pinapatayo para sa moderate to severe patients. Naroon ang ilang piling miyembro ng gabinete. Inaasahan din na naroon ang chair ng Health Committee on Health and Demography, si Senator Christopher Bongo. Ito po ang ilan sa mga larawan ng Quezon Institute. Magbubukas din sa linggong ito ang mga sumusunod. Tignan po natin ang mga larawan at videos. Subic Manila Times Colleges na mayroong 300-bed capacity. New Clark City na may additional 165 beds. COVID-19 update naman po tayo. Ito pong ranking ng Pilipinas ngayon sa mundo ayon sa Johns Hopkins. Number 30 pa rin po ang Pilipinas pagdating sa total cases. Number 19 sa active cases. Number 134 sa cases per 1 million population at number 94 sa case fatality rate. Ngayon po ay 1.7%, below the world average of 2.1%. Meron tayong 8,355 na mga bagong kaso ayon sa April 5, 2021 datos ng DOH. Sa mga aktibong mga kaso, 98.5% ay mild at asymptomatic, nasa 0.5% ang critical at 0.6% ang severe. Nasa 646,237 ang kabuang bilang ng mga gumagaling. Samantala, malungkot naming binabalita na nasa 13,435 na po ang binawian ng buhay dahil sa coronavirus. Nakikiramay po kami. Nasa 1.67 po ang fatality rate. Ito po ang confirmed COVID-19 cases by adjusted date of onset as of April 5, 2021. Nakita niyo po na matapos ang Semana Santa, bumaba po, no? Pero hindi pa po tayo sigurado kung ito po yung epekto na ng ating naunang travel bubble kasi nga po, Semana Santa, baka kakaunti lang po nagpa-test. So titignan po natin sa mga susunod na araw kung nag-epekto yung ating travel bubble. Kasi 2 linggo po ang kinakailangan lumipas bago natin malaman kung naging epektibo yung mga hakbang ginawa natin.
Meanwhile, Malacanang also on Tuesday extended well wishes to former President Joseph Erap Estrada after he tested positive for COVID-19. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque expressed hope that the former president would immediately recover from the virus. On Monday, former Senator Jinggoy Estrada announced that his father had contracted COVID-19. The younger Estrada said his father was rushed to the hospital on March 28 due to body weakness. He is now in stable condition. According to Estrada's other son, former Senator J.V. Ejercito, there was no space availability at the time, so his father was forced to spend the night in the emergency room. Estrada's other son, celebrity Jake Ejercito, also announced the news over Twitter and sought prayers for their father. Estrada was president from 1998 to 2001, was ousted after a series of protests on EDSA held from January 18 to 20 of 2001 amid his trial for plunder charges. He also served as mayor of the city of Manila from 2013 to 2019. The country is currently grappling with a spike in COVID cases, particularly in Metro Manila, Bulacan, Laguna, Rizal, and Cavite, which have been placed under the most strict quarantine classification until April 4. As of Monday, the country has recorded 731,894 confirmed cases, of which 603,213 are recoveries, with 13,186 recorded deaths. The country has also set a new record for a single-day increase in COVID cases, with 10,016 new infections on Monday.
Meanwhile, Belgians are protesting against health restrictions imposed by the government. Here's Maria Dawson of our EBC Belgium Bureau with that story. Maria, tell us what's happening there.
Yes, hello, CJ. As of Monday, April 5, there are 9,996 cases, which 819,602 are active cases in Belgium. As of April 4, there are 1,496,083 people in Belgium who have received at least one dose of vaccine against COVID-19, and 569,101 people are fully vaccinated. Even so, due to the increase of numbers of active cases, the consultative committee implemented a set of strict measures to fight the third wave of infections, which started Friday, March 26, and will last for at least 4 weeks. Prime Minister Decaux explained to have opted for a short-term pain and that it was easier to make a heavy decision, but was needed, or else the consequences would have been more serious. The new measures were taken on all educational levels. Classes have been suspended and students have received an early 1-week school break, and is expected to reopen starting April 19. The next measures are for non-essential shops. Shops can now only receive clients by appointment and are only allowed to shop with maximum 1 additional person, but they have to be from the same household. These shops are also allowed to have maximum of 50 clients at a time, but essential shops will remain open and function as normal. Contact profession, such as hairdresser and beauty parlors that recently reopened on March 1st, had to close their doors once again. People are also allowed to meet outdoors, but will be reduced from 10 people to a bubble of 4 people. Yet, after taking all those measures, on Wednesday, March 31, Belgium has been asked to lift all COVID-19 measures ruled by a Brussels court. The Human Rights League filed in February a lawsuit against the Belgian state for implementing COVID-19 measures without the input of the parliament. Therefore, Belgium was given 30 days to provide legal basis for the taken COVID-19 measures. As of now, the set measures will remain, but for each day past the 30 days, the Belgian state will face a penalty of 5,000 euros. Back to you, CJ.
Well, hopefully, Maria, the protest there will not result to a spike in infections. Thank you so much for that story, Maria. Please do stay safe over there and keep us posted on the recent developments there in Belgium.
Thank you for having me reporting from Belgium. I'm Maria Dawson. We live in interesting times.
All right, and the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by Canriv Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel, hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation, and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
Welcome back. The United States is pushing the G20 to adopt a global minimum corporate tax to stem the erosion of government revenues. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said this on Monday. Meanwhile, President Biden expressed outrage at multinationals like Amazon that have moved to tax havens or used loopholes and pay little to no tax, far less than some individuals, and said he would put a stop to the practice. His plan would raise the U.S. corporate tax rate to 28% and a minimum for multinationals to 21%. He dismissed concerns the higher rate would drive companies overseas. Let's listen in.
Not at all. Not at all. Look, the tax, because there's no evidence of that. The tax was 36%. It's now down to 21%. And the idea that's bizarre. We were talking about a 28% tax that everybody thought was just fair enough for everybody. The idea, here you have 51 or 52 corporations of the Fortune 500 haven't paid a single penny in tax for 3 years. Come on, man. Just get real. People, I'm going to push as hard as I can to change the circumstance so we can compete with the rest of the world. Everybody around the world is investing billions and billions of dollars in infrastructure. And we're going to do it here. Thank you.
Are you concerned about a fourth wave of coronavirus?
We're working with G20 nations to agree to a global minimum corporate tax rate that can stop the race to the bottom. Together, we can use a global minimum tax to make sure the global economy thrives based on a more level playing field in the taxation of multinational corporations and spurs innovation, growth, and prosperity.
More on that news. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says America is pushing in the G20 to adopt a global minimum corporate tax to stem the erosion of government revenues. Speaking to the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, Yellen also outlined the Biden administration push to resume the multilateral cooperation halted under former President Donald Trump. Watch this.
So how do we help the poorest countries get through this crisis? Our first task must clearly be stopping the virus by ensuring that vaccinations, testing, and therapeutics are available as widely as possible. Low-income countries risk falling to the back of the line and may not achieve widespread vaccine coverage until 2023 or 2024 at the current pace. The United States needs to have a strong presence in global markets on a level playing field. We will cooperate with willing partners to protect and enforce a rules-based order. Our economic relationship with China, like our broader relationship with China, will be competitive where it should be, collaborative where it can be, and adversarial where it must be. Over the last 4 years, we have seen firsthand what happens when America steps back from the global stage. America first must never mean America alone. For in today's world, no country alone can suitably provide a strong and sustainable economy for its people. The first objective is a stable and growing world economy that benefits the U.S. economy. For the United States to prosper, our neighbors too must prosper. In the modern world, recession, instability, and crime abroad find ways to wash upon our shore. Strong and stable economies abroad make us safer. We will The second objective is to fight poverty and promote a more inclusive global economy that aligns with our values. Unless we act now, the world is susceptible to the emergence of a deepening global divergence between rich and poor countries.
Meanwhile, several Philippine Airlines or PAL flights going to Region 6 or Western Visayas have been canceled until April 10. In an advisory posted on its Facebook page Monday, PAL said the cancellation is in line with the temporary suspension of inbound travel to Western Visayas from the National Capital Region, Cebu and Davao. Flights from Manila to Bacolod, Iloilo, Antique, Caticlan, Calibo, Rojas City, from Cebu to Caticlan and Bacolod are canceled until April 10. Bacolod-Cebu flights are canceled on April 9. Affected passengers may request to convert their ticket to a travel voucher until June 30. They may also avail of unlimited rebooking until December 31st or opt for a refund. In an advisory dated April 4, the Civil Aeronautics Board said the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases has approved the request of Region 6 to temporarily suspend inbound travel from NCR, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, Rizal, Cebu City, and Davao City until April 10.
In other business news, the EU authorized the French government on Tuesday to double its stake in Air France and inject up to 4 billion euros into the struggling airline, whose revenues have been hit by the pandemic-induced drop in passenger traffic. The agreement, worth $4.7 billion, follows weeks of negotiations with the EU Commission, which must ensure that state aid does not give companies an unfair advantage. Air France posted a 7.1 billion euro loss in 2020 as its business, like that of the rest of the world's airlines, suffered from coronavirus restrictions, which all but grounded global air traffic. In return for its green light, the Commission, which is the EU's antitrust regulator, said Air France would relinquish about 18 slots per day at Orly, Paris' second largest airport after Charles de Gaulle. The Netherlands flag carrier KLM, which forms an alliance with Air France, will not benefit from the aid. Nevertheless, the Dutch government welcomed the approval of additional aid.
Meanwhile, Swedish fashion giant H&M is to lay off more than 1,000 staff in Spain, who are currently on furlough due to the pandemic. According to the Workers' Commission Union today, the fashion chain was not immediately available to confirm the information. Now, the union called the shop closures absolutely disproportionate and the layoffs of furloughed staff unjustified. The funding of such temporary unemployment schemes was one of the key measures put in place by Socialist Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's government to bolster an economy battered by months of lockdown. That and other emergency measures to ease the crisis have cost the Spanish Treasury a dizzying 40 billion euros, more than $47 billion since the start of the pandemic. In return, companies are banned from laying off staff for 6 months after the end of the scheme, which is currently set to run until May 31st, but is likely to be extended. H&M's net profit tumbled tenfold in 2020 as a result of the pandemic, with the fashion retailer saying it would shutter 350 of its 5,000 shops across the globe while opening another 100.
Meanwhile, the level of unemployment in the Eurozone did not change in February. Official data showed Tuesday as national schemes to keep companies afloat held off the worst effects of the pandemic. Eurostat, the EU statistics agency, said unemployment was at 8.3% in the 19 countries that use the euro single currency, the same as a revised figure for January. Youth unemployment in the Eurozone, which has risen more sharply during the COVID crisis, edged lower to 17.3% according to Eurostat. That still remained higher than a year before, just before a wave of lockdowns crushed the economy, when unemployment in the Eurozone had stood at 7.4%, with youth unemployment at 15.4%. Joblessness in Europe exploded in the spring of 2020, the result of a landmark recession as restrictions on movement kept people at home in many countries across the globe. However, many national governments implemented EU-backed job guarantee schemes and other programs that have so far averted a long-term shock on employment that many had feared. Eagle News will be right back for more updates. Please don't go away.
Sa panahon na laganap ang mga sakit, katuwang nyo ang BMEG Premium at Protect Plus Gold. Gawa sa state-of-the-art facilities ang BMEG Premium Feeds. Kaya ito ay safe, sanitized, and hygienic. Walang dalang sakit, certified, malinis, sariwa at sigurado. At para laging malinis ang paligid, gumamit ng Protect Plus Gold. Isang safe broad-spectrum disinfectant na pumapatay ng mga virus, bacteria at fungi. BMEG Premium at Protect Plus Gold. Sama-sama sa laban, walang iwanan.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Remote-control Venus flytrap robo-plants and crops that tell farmers when they're hit by disease could become reality after scientists developed a high-tech system for communicating with vegetation. Take a look.
Can be integrated with our physical, this kind of artificial work together. Then build this kind of hybrid systems. And then in one day, I need this kind of robot hands. I just carry from nature and use it and control it. So this is also...
In this feature, I'm able to apply the hydrogel very conformably on plants with rough surface and even hairy surface. And in this way, I can get very high quality signals from plants of all types of surface textures. So this is the main. So these signals will reflect the health status of the plants. So we hope to study the relationship of these signals and the environmental stresses, and hopefully this can instruct the agricultural practice.
Researchers in Singapore linked up plants to electrodes capable of monitoring the weak electrical pulses naturally emitted by the greenery. The scientists used the technology to trigger a Venus flytrap to snap its jaws shut at the push of a button on a smartphone app. The scientists used the technology to trigger a Venus flytrap to snap its jaws shut at the push of the button on a smartphone app. Then they attached one of its jaws to a robotic arm and got the contraption to pick up a piece of wire 0.5 millimeter thick and catch a small falling object. The technology is in its early stages, But researchers believe it could eventually be used to build advanced plant-based robots that can pick up a host of fragile objects which are too delicate for rigid robotic arms. The system can also pick up signals emitted by plants, raising the possibility that farmers will be able to detect problems with their crops at an early stage.
More than 1 million households and businesses in Taiwan's heavily industrialized central regions were put on water rationing Tuesday as the island battles its worst drought in 56 years. The shortage is expected to particularly impact the water-intensive microchip manufacturing sector during a global shortage of semiconductors that power everything from cars to iPhones and computers. On rationing days, various restrictions are in place, including no shampoo treatments at hair salons and no car washes at gas stations. The dry spell comes after no typhoons made landfall in Taiwan last year for the first time in 56 years. The worsening water shortage could hamper the island's plan to plug worldwide pandemic-driven microchip shortages by ramping up production. Taiwanese high-tech chip foundries are some of the world's biggest and most advanced, and European and American car manufacturers have been reaching out to Taipei for help. Tougher restrictions imposed from February have seen factories and industrial zones forced to slash water usage by up to 15% in some central and southern parts of the island.
Wearing hats, caps, team jerseys, and face masks, fans returned to New York's Yankee Stadium for the first time since October 2019 as the new Major League Baseball season begins. Take a look.
This is the first step for me mentally to think that we're getting back to normal. Things are looking good. To any Yankee fans out there who feel like I have, the moment you set foot near it, you're going to feel the exact same thing.
It feels pretty good. As like a baseball fan or a Yankees fan, any type of fan, it's good to be back in the stadium.
I got fully vaccinated, so just showing the vaccination card after 14 days is good enough.
In other sports news, a Tokyo Olympics water polo test event has been postponed, organizers said Tuesday, following reports it had been called off because sports officials cannot enter Japan due to virus restrictions. Test events function as dress rehearsals for each sport, and the two-day water polo test was supposed to open on Saturday but will now be held in May or June, according to Tokyo 2020 organizers. A series of qualifiers and tests for the virus-delayed Tokyo Games due to open on July 23 have been canceled or postponed because of COVID-19 border rules. Tokyo 2020 said in consultation with others, including the International Swimming Federation, a decision had been taken to postpone the event. Local media earlier reported that the event had been canceled because of Japan's strict travel restrictions, which bar virtually all foreign nationals from entering the country. The report said timekeepers and record keepers who were due to travel to Japan could not take part in the event. On Monday, the Japan Triathlon Union also announced that a Triathlon World Cup event due to be held in Osaka in May has been canceled because of the virus restrictions. The competition was not an Olympic test event, but helps decide which athletes will qualify for the Games and was meant to feature 130 triathletes from 30 different countries.
I thought we still had some NBA news, but Direct Sam doesn't want it anymore. Anyways.
Well, that's it for tonight's broadcast. We're still hoping the Olympics push us through in July. Well, join us again tomorrow for more news. I am CJ Hero.
Hopefully it's happening, and at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back tomorrow. We live in interesting
times.
This program is supported by BMEG Premium at Protect Plus Gold. Sama-sama sa laban.